Does your favorite film look different? Have you ever noticed something that felt just a little off when you picked up that sparkling new Blu-ray? Maybe you're already the type of pixel-peeping asshole who sees where I'm going with this. Modern technology lets us see many movies better than we ever have before, a process frequently known as restoration. But it's that same technology that can lead to alterations, subtle changes, and what is essentially historical revisionism. Films were once literally on film. You can still find movies from time to time that are shot on film, but the medium has, for the past few years, been dominated by digital acquisition, and with that comes a certain objectivity to the image. With film, consistency depends on the lab handling it, the transfer process used, and the final grade applied to the digitized image. Though the comparison isn't quite accurate, if you've ever tried scanning a printed image, you'll know that it's not as easy as scanning and releasing it to the world if you want accurate color. Color grading, as it's known today, has a long history in photochemical processing. The old term color timing referred to the literal time that each color element of the film was developed and processed. As you can imagine, the level of control available back then was minuscule compared to what we have today. And we can easily identify color trends in movies because of it. You've certainly seen examples like teal and orange, crushed blacks, and bleach bypass. There are trends in color grading that pop up from time to time, arguably defining when the film was made. Here's a familiar shot, right? Well, here's what it looks like today. I'm not sure what to call this trend because it's not quite the same as the teal-orange trend you'd see in an action thriller. One common trait is that blues all seem to shift slightly to green. The overall brightness of the image is brought down, and the white point almost never actually reaches pure white. To get technical for a moment, I've suspected that part of this style comes out of the desire to contain the entire dynamic range of film, or close to it, within the range possible in standard dynamic range video. This, unfortunately, can lead to images that, compared to their older versions, might actually appear dimmer or lower in contrast. Color grading can even retroactively enhance movies that already use a certain style, but can now be made even more distinct. Take this example of The Matrix, which, when re-released on a DVD box set in 2006, was given a color grade more in line with its sequels. But is this a problem? It depends. In cases like The Matrix, the set design, cinematography, and the original intent already match what was changed later on. In other words, the result might be different, but it doesn't clash with the original appearance. Sci-fi films in general tend to be somewhat forgiving to stylish grades. Blade Runner's numerous cuts have a more natural coloration, harsher contrast, and a lot less teal than its now definitive final cut. The Terminator's latest 4K remaster also features a lower contrast image with a lot more teal. Some may consider this too far, but given James Cameron's fascination with blue lights, it works pretty well. Let's get back to that Lord of the Rings example. Here is a case where the new color grade simply does not work. In some instances, you can kind of see how adding some teal and pulling some of the red out of skin tones looks a little more modern. But then you have shots like this. Two things to note. This is only in the extended Blu-ray version of the film, and when released was the only film of the three to see such a significant change from its theatrical version. Why did this happen, though? For many years, beginning roughly in the early 1990s, movies began to undergo a digital intermediate process. DIs were used to scan portions of the movie that relied on computer graphics, then a burgeoning and still very expensive process. In other words, many movies prior to around the mid-2000s were still only partly digitized and would be largely cut on film to avoid the cost of a transfer. As visual effects and digital tools overall had matured, films began to more frequently use digital intermediates for their entire running length. Today, the digital intermediate process is somewhat nebulous, as digital cameras mean the image is already prepared for extensive post-processing work. What this means is that certain films have been transferred years ago in a good enough state, HD, after all, has been around for many years now, and Hollywood was mastering films in HD long before it became accessible to the masses. But those transfers don't quite hold up today. Transfers like these were presumably done from an interpositive that was only a few steps away from the theatrical print that was made way back then, because it had to have all the DI work and all the traditional made film edits. When Fellowship of the Ring was first released on Blu-ray in its theatrical cut, viewers complained of a soft, unnatural-looking image, with detail that wasn't quite on par with its sequels. This is because the theatrical release used an older transfer. It was technically high definition, but due to a combination of older scanning technology, less robust digital tools, and antiquated mastering practices, it looks unimpressive compared to a modern transfer. When the extended edition was released on Blu-ray, a brand new transfer was commissioned. The separate film elements were rescanned either from what is known as the OCN, original camera negative, or a newly struck interpositive. This allows for a transfer that gets much closer to the true quality of the original film. As you can imagine, this process allows for some subjectivity. Interestingly, Peter Jackson and cinematographer Andrew Lesnie have both approved of this change, and you'd be surprised that in many cases, the director is, or at least claims to be, somewhat involved in these releases, even years down the line. Director's intent is the go-to argument for most changes in film releases, and modernization is hardly an alien concept to almost all forms of entertainment. Film restoration itself is a form of modernization, and every decade your favorite film gets released over and over again with better sound and picture. In music, the loudness war gives heart palpitations to those who love dynamic range. In art, famous pieces are painstakingly, but often controversially, restored. In video games, we see HD remasters that range from faithful to reimagined. The point is, should we be concerned with what is just another tool to modernize classic content? Though color changes may seem superficial, digital restoration can absolutely harm artistic intent, so it's up to studios, directors, and even fans to make sure these releases stay faithful. Many classic films are either given improper or subpar treatment. This is what happened to Fellowship, and when they're restored, they trade in their color for detail. It's a frustrating situation for the viewer who remembers a film a certain way, but what's more problematic is the historical inaccuracy. Films are not only stylized based on trends of the time, but physically must appear a certain way based on the limitations of the time. Film stocks and color timing technologies only allowed for so much manipulation, and when restoring a film, there is often word of using older prints or set photos as reference points for color. Some films even deliberately removed color elements from the film stock to achieve distinct looks, and good transfers have preserved these intentions. Today's digital tools should be used to best represent what was created all those years ago. There are bound to be subtle changes to detail and color as the technology improves to unveil what might have been covered by dirt, poor handling, age, or even our own inability to previously capture all that detail. So, the next time you watch a movie, ask yourself if this is how it was intended to be.